All right, we are live May 30th, 2025. Just 11 days out from what could be a very interesting day. I doubt it's going to be anything like what we're expecting. There's always a curveball, but we'll see. It's not always completely literal, but it's kind of unequivocal. And if you look at the consistent representation of the destruction of the Space Needle in conjunction with the whole EMP blackout earthquake thing, so there's only a few things it could possibly be. And one thing I don't really harp on, but I had brought it before, and we often talked about it, is this Kraken thing in conjunction with this incoming scenario, and how this ties into a hunt for Red October, for example, and a few other examples of the nuke being represented as something from underwater. And last year we were talking quite a lot about the Odyssey and the significance of those two astronauts stranded as a result of Calypso, which is the name of the nymph who imprisoned Odysseus. Well, they're back. And what happens after he is released? Well, he confronts the Cyclops and then Poseidon. And then we had this conversation about the weapon, the Poseidon weapon, some kind of nuke from the sea that could wipe out a coastal city. So the story's been building up, but in Final Destination, at the base of the Space Needle, is a sculpture of a massive crab coming out of the water. So I think it ties it together kind of neatly that, yeah, EMP seems to be somewhere in this story, but it may not be high altitude. It may be from the water. And that would be very consistent because, you know, this whole conversation is really about how the story's been told to us in many different ways. And the Kraken ties in with Godzilla. Godzilla is a metaphor for the nuke. And the timing of the release of Godzilla coincided with Oppenheimer, not coincidentally. And then, of course, Barbieheimer. We broke down the symbolism of this story, but, you know, ultimately it does seem that this nuke scenario somehow involves the water and a coast, specifically, you know, Seattle. And we recently were just talking about, and this kind of ties in. Yesterday we were talking about this Japanese comic book that predicted the 3/11/11 Fukushima disaster and tsunamis. So this is somewhat related. Well, it's actually entirely related because right now there's a prediction from this comic book that points at July, and it says tourists are canceling plans. Japanese comic book predicts major disaster in July. So you can just kind of see the ideas that are being put out there. Travelers avoid trips to Japan over viral comic books quake predictions. And if you think about it, it's kind of smart to use predictive programming as a model, even if you think it's real, because it's consistent. J. Dig says, did the comic mention what caused the tsunami, assuming earthquake, but maybe nuclear asteroid or beast of the sea? Good question. All right, joined by Pete Trippa, Frank Murr, Ears Up, Diana, the HBIC, Ted Stryker, and Mizell. And Diana Southart says, the tsunami created by a nuke submarine. That's kind of where I'm looking at. Cope says, EMP, blackout, nukes, submarine, tsunamis, earthquake, space junk, meteor. Okay, let's add on to this. One of the scenarios that we have comes from Terminator 2, James Cameron. And on 9/11, James Cameron, who also did Titanic, which features the big ship split in two like Twin Towers sinking, complete with jumpers. But on 9/11, he was at the site of the sunken Titanic in a craft called the Deep Sea Challenger. So I'm thinking here, you know, we're looking at this kind of a vision taken out of Revelation 9/11, you know, about this beast, Apollyon, the destroyer, overlooking the disaster, which recalls 9/11 in many ways, Ground Zero. And you even have the vision of Arnie, Terminator 2, from Collateral Damage, overlooking Ground Zero. But I think in this instance, the Challenger that he was in, which is what he called his submersible, might have been symbolic of whatever brings down the giant, the Titan, the sunken Titanic. And I think this might represent, of course, the the nuke. And of course, blackouts, EMPs, this is all over. And there's different ways they've represented it. There was a #1 show, which doesn't mean it's good, but if it's #1, it's relevant for our interests. And it was called Canary Black. And this was about a, quote, digital nuke, which allowed this Putin-like bad guy to essentially shake down the whole world, but leave the world behind, white noise. And we've talked about this quite a bit too, white noise overlapping with the real world train derailment in East Palestine, and how its main character is Adam Driver, which of course connects East Palestine and the airborne, or yeah, I guess they call it the toxic airborne event, with Butler. It's only 42 miles between Butler and East Palestine, but we were talking about the significance of the nuke scenario in conjunction with the head wound scenario as it's been represented in various movies, which is why we more or less project it happening this way on the world stage. So let's just get into this, because today Musk was asked about his black eye. So Elon Musk has a black eye. If you haven't seen the picture of it, it looks like a black teardrop. And he was taking questions from the reporter, and he joked about how he wasn't in France, alluding to the president of France's wife, who was on camera kind of slapping him with both hands. But if you look here, Musk is addressing the media, and he's next to a statue, a bust of Abraham Lincoln, whose head is pointing down for some reason. And analyzing it a little closer, Trump's right in front of that sculpture, which is based on that famous scene of the Marines raising the flag. Now, if you remember Butler, Pennsylvania, when the shooting happened on 7/13, there was a certain way that they photographed Trump. Like, he posed for the cameras, just like the character in Mickey 17. In one of the shots, they looked like they were reenacting the cover of Braveheart, the Mel Gibson Braveheart. But in another shot, when he's surrounded by the Secret Service, there's a flag behind him, and he's yelling, "Fight, fight, fight." It looks like they choreographed it to match that particular scene. And that's how a lot of this propaganda works. It's about imitation, association. So they built these associations into it. The Braveheart thing was very blatant to me. 84 days later, Trump goes back to Butler, Elon Musk in tow. So Elon Musk is right there with him. And the New York Post headline said Braveheart, because, brave of him to go back. Or something else, because I think it's obviously the subtext is the Braveheart association here was by design visually, and of course attaching that. And it's significant for a few reasons, especially if you look at Mel Gibson as a metascriptor, his work with Jim Caviezel and how it relates to MAGA and Q. Side topic mostly, but here's Trump in front of that sculpture. So to me, that points back to Butler. And 84 days later, of course, Musk is with him at Butler. And Jurassic Liars had actually made this kind of interesting prediction about Rocket Man. And he had this, based on the date, he suggested, and I think it related to the birth date of Elton John, Rocket Man. He said something about Rocket Man having some significance that day. And nobody knew until that day that Musk was going to be there. So it was kind of interesting that Musk is right there in Butler, jumping up and down like a cheerleader behind Trump. But the deeper significance, I think Elton John, in the meantime, has lost vision in his right eye. So Elton John, Rocket Man, loses vision in his right eye. So here's Musk, Rocket Man, and his right eye, of course, is blackened. And he said he was punched by his 5-year-old kid, X. And he told his kid to punch him. And so X also is the name of the kid, at least that's what they call him. So I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? In conjunction, big picture. Trump, Musk, Lincoln. And then this Butler, Pennsylvania reference. I'm not going to play the clip just yet, but here I kind of highlighted it for you. Again, what I'm pointing out here is this is all tied in with Lincoln, and we've been talking about the significance of Lincoln and the penny in recent days, specifically because of the significance of it with the class war, race war stuff, and Final Destination as well, which of course makes use of the penny to allude to a few things, but it's the penny that kicks off the destruction of the Space Needle. And you can't really disassociate Lincoln from the headshot. By the way, at the same press conference, he said he's going to pardon Diddy. And I'm like, wait a minute here. That's pardoning Diddy would be like pardoning Epstein to a lot of people. Because the way the story has evolved, people think Diddy was a part of some operation. But if Trump is going to pardon him, how is this going to sit with the QAnon people who have really glommed onto as sort of their cause? They're all about Justin Bieber now. They're like, Justin Bieber is a victim of Diddy and they're praying for Bieber, QAnon prayer circles. It's really strange how they've turned him into their personal martyr. And I don't think he cares. Like they live in a world of fan fiction, these Q people. But they saw this Diddy thing as evidence that the deep state would be revealed and the bad guys would be exposed and everything would be brought into the light. And here we are looking at Trump talking about, well, Diddy used to like me, so he's going to be pardoned. And I'm thinking, well, if I was a cognitively dissonant, confused QAnoner, how would I process that? And the way I would process it is, I would say, okay, well, Diddy is obviously a white hat. So the white parties is just code for the sting, and he was helping Trump set up the bad guys to... I mean, that's what I'm waiting for. These people will do all kinds of mental somersaults to maintain their illusion that things are about to be revealed. And at the beginning of the year, it was JFK files. Then it was UFO stuff. Then it was Epstein stuff. They just cycle through these, and they never actually reveal anything. Perpetual cliffhangers. Jay Digg says, some of the left's conspiracies I saw today were the Treasury Secretary or Stephen Miller punched him in the face. A lot of people are talking about his alleged incontinence as a result of overuse of ketamine. We were just talking about this in Discord, and I think our consensus, more or less, is that it's more likely that he is just a reality TV show character. That's the best way to consider him. Elon Musk is a construct. He's got about a dozen puppeteers remotely operating him from some boardroom. By the way, Texas court signals overturn of Alex Jones' Sandy Hook verdict. It's not like he was guilty. This was a civil thing. I mean, it's not a crime. He said some mean things on the internet. He got sued for $1 billion. He played like he was being censored. Raised a lot of money, I'm sure. And at the end of the day, it's being overturned because it was kind of weak anyway. It wasn't even all that believable. I'll get into that here in a minute. And relatedly, Waterbury, Connecticut mall shooting had a press conference, and the press conference was being criticized for being like a PR infomercial. Every mass shooting is a PR infomercial. But the governor came out and he says here, the governor Ned Lamont and Waterbury city officials took the stage. But instead of explaining why active shooter drills failed, why the 19-year-old shooter was free on bond, most of the time was spent... Anyway, it did seem like a PR thing. But I thought the headlines just seemed like appropriate for every shooting. Seemed like a PR infomercial. And describing why the drills don't work. Isn't it interesting that literally all of the mass shootings happen at places where they just did drills? That's usually what you hear. The news runs up and the students are like, yeah, we just did a drill for this today. It came in handy. I'm like, okay, this thing was a drill. It would be really unusual if every place that had a drill had the real thing happen and they handle it badly because the body counts are so high anyway. Like, what's the point of the drills? He's going to get 1 kill for every bullet. Like, you guys aren't preventing anything. Okay, let's look into this. Well, we'll get into this tomorrow more than likely. There's still some... It's been signaled that it's going to be overturned because when it comes down to it, Alex Jones didn't really say anything. In fact, he reiterated in this description here, in this video description of what happened, he reiterates that he believes people died. He was never a nobody died person. What happened is somebody called in and they said nobody died, and he kind of half-heartedly agreed, but it was a very flippant comment. He certainly wasn't responsible for any of the conspiracy theorists who are harassing crisis actors. And you know what? I've said this before, but pointing out crisis actors seems to be an intelligence operation. I mean, I know a lot of people do this, but there's these channels that are generally anonymous. You don't know who these people are. It's always like some kind of polished YouTube channel, and all they do is they find you the latest clips of a crisis actor. And that seems to me, now that I think about it, like a limited hangout. Like, people are going to find out that we're running these drills. So let's leak out some part of it that nobody will believe. We can make them look crazy and make them look violent. Make them look unhinged and dangerous. And they've successfully done this. If you remember Sidethorn Journalist, he went out to 33 different mass shooting sites calling it hoax. You know, every one of these, he called them out as a hoax. He protested. But he got arrested for harassing crisis actors. That was the whole point. Or people he alleged to be crisis actors. Then you have this guy, is it Richard Mill, the guy in the UK? Same thing with the Manchester bombing. He's out there spying on people who were supposedly part of this bomb attack and then calling into question whether or not it actually happened. So you have these various individuals who seem like the only thing they focus on are the low-level actors in these events. And that's fine, but why isn't anyone asking about the directors or following it a little deeper? If this is true, that this person's an actor, then what else must be true regarding the media, the police, the funeral homes, the hospitals, and different agencies involved? You can kind of see here that the reason they would want you focused on something like crisis actors, which is fun, funny, obvious, but it's like it never goes anywhere, and they kind of keep it there. And then they make it a crime to mention it. Or you're associated with these psychopaths and lunatics online, where now legitimate criticism has been shut down. So in my opinion, going after crisis actors is low-hanging fruit. We should be looking really above that. Because it's not just these witnesses, the cameraman for the media, the news reporters, they're part of the crew. It's not like a group of people are fooling the news and the news is just running with bad information. No, they are the actual production. The news media is the production company producing essentially a propaganda film. So everyone there is an actor. Oh, good. I'm glad you brought this up. Diana Southard says, what was the movie where the guy called out crisis actors? Zero Day, with Robert De Niro, who plays a Biden-like character, and Trump's in control. And there's a 9/11-like event in New York involving two subways crashing, and he comes out all serious. And then somebody runs up to the news cameras because there's a big crowd because their families are in the subways. And this guy gets up, and I couldn't see what was on his shirt, but he screamed, "Nobody died. Those are all crisis actors." And then the mob goes crazy and they attack him and he starts a riot. So this movie opens up with a blackout big attack in New York, and the first person to call it a hoax is like worse than the terrorists that did it. Like Alex Jones made some good points in his commentary. He said that more people know about him than the name of the actual shooter. It's like more people know about Alex Jones than David Hogg. And that's because he's been made the face of this event. And so in the future, people are going to say Alex Jones killed those kids. It wasn't, well, Lanza. When I say David Hogg, you know, that was an inside joke. And when I say inside joke, I don't mean it's not true. I mean inside the PSYOP entertainment complex joke, and we're kind of in on it because we noticed that they recycle crisis actors all the time. And David Hogg is a crisis actor confirmed because he's on some kind of Project Veritas, O'Keefe Media Group, you know, that performance artist, performative journalism. They caught David Hogg saying some things about the Democrat Party in a fake sting. Anybody who appears in any of these videos, from O'Keefe is obviously an actor. But he did make a good point. Nobody knows about Adam Lanza. So shout out Adam Lanza. Alex Jones has been more or less vindicated. Okay, let's see here. Trump wants to pardon Diddy. We talked about that. Okay, now this was something that was just sent to me on Instagram. I saw some video and it was kind of rapid fire mentioning a lot of stuff that I had missed. But we've been looking at these various events like the bridges. So the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which was hit by the Dolly boat, is something we talked about because of the significance of the Star-Spangled Banner. Francis Scott Key, America, Leave the World Behind, these overlapping stories. Well, listen to this. When that boat hit the Brooklyn Bridge on May 17, 2025, America Sanchez, 20-year-old Mexican naval cadet, award-winning swimmer, was one of the 2 victims who died when the Mexican Navy training ship collided with the Brooklyn Bridge. It was carrying 277 crew, lost power, and was carried by the current into the bridge. Isn't that exactly what happened? And 3 masts snapped upon impact. That's kind of interesting. 3 masts. I was thinking about the Space Needle, which has the 3, and the International Hotel, the 3 columns with the Star Trek ship on it, making this Space Needle-like image. But anyway, America died, is what I'm pointing out here with the bridge collision. So this person, I got to find the video. Instagram's terrible. I get a notification, I click it, I watch the video, and then I can't find it in my feed. But I will find it. But I got the important details. So America dies, there might be some key here. And then Francis Scott Key ties into this in this way. He brought up the Pope. So the title pontiff comes from the Latin word pontifex, which means bridge builder. This ancient term underscores the Pope's role in fostering connections. So someone suggested there might be some significance tied in with the death of bridge builder Francis, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and this other bridge with the death of America kind of written into the story. And there's more involving the new Pope, but I couldn't get the whole video back. But the death of America just sounds poetic, like we were talking about when Summer and Love died at the end of the Summer of Love 2020 when they were hit by a white car. Okay, here's something I was thinking of, and I don't have any evidence for this, but I'm thinking, does it really matter if you have 10,000 skeptics who figured out how the fake news works when they pull off big events? Because what determines the efficacy of the PSYOP is how many people believe it. And I was thinking, what if they can build an artificial consensus of belief with AI agents? Not just regular bots, but I'm talking interactive agents like the kind that were unleashed by the University of Zurich onto Reddit, which converted people at rates that were way more effective than humans could do, converting people from one ideology to another. So these AI agents could fake belief, or they could just be, not even faking it. The knowledge base consists of these facts that are true. So now you have armies of bots that are very believable, adding to the illusion of a consensus. They all pass the Turing test. Like, they all seem more alive than your neighbors. Like, they're very interactive and engaged. I mean, this is like in depth because they know stuff. Their target marketing is what I'm thinking. And they could be used to shut down and shame skeptics. And I was thinking too, there's no limit because there's only so many shills and trolls you can hire, and how many bot farms are there. But there's still limits. But there aren't any limits in this case. Not right now anymore with AI. So hypothetically, you could have 10,000 bots active on problematic skeptics, and not just them. Like, they might be aimed at me, for example, but they could just as easily scatter around to my social media network and target my friends and families and gatekeep certain mind viruses or attitudes, and possibly even work on others, influence them to get them to influence you. indirectly, like cults do. We're talking about groupthink, and there's a science to it. And we do live in a big cult, but I'm just suggesting here that the same dynamics could be brought into play virtually through your social media without you ever knowing. And you wouldn't know because they're subtly influencing the people around you. If they're not already doing that, and I would argue that they are. And it doesn't even require bots. They're doing it with people all the time. Influence operations happen all the time, various sorts, but now it's a matter of can they scale it up to such a point to where it's incontestable? Like there are so many that it doesn't matter if 10,000 of us or even 1 million of us are laughing at the fake alien invasion, because now we've got 1 billion bots and they're drowning us out, outgrouping us. Let's see. Kaylee Fisher says Elon Musk is a bio-android Manchurian agent, the product of an NLP experiment by Werner von Braun. The programming is the sci-fi novel. Elon was primed by his parents. They caused him to identify and absorb the character. See, I actually believe this, but I don't think it's Manchurian Candidate. I think it's acting school. So he's not a mind-controlled, compromised individual with no agency. No, he's a reality TV star, and he's one of the biggest stars on the world stage. And he has been programmed, but he's not just the Elon from von Braun's book. He's also a bit of, I would say, Jack Parsons, Willy Wonka, Iron Man, Tony Stark, and a few others they may have amalgamated onto him. Oh, what's the name of the guy who talks about the simulation? Paul something? There's that famous philosopher who said that there's something about a 95% chance that we live in a simulation. And the guy had a way of talking. Like his sentences were kind of, he would pause mid-sentence. He was kind of methodical about how he spoke. But he also kind of reminded me of how Elon used to speak, or how he does speak when he gets into these certain topics. And I thought, he's probably absorbed that individual's mannerisms as well. Okay, moving on. I'm scrolling through my feed here at minds.com/Infinite Plane Society. We mentioned this. Trump's on a mission from God. He's sharing some pretty deep-rooted QAnon iconography. Like this is like vintage stuff. Pepe the Frog, where we go one, we go all, nothing can stop what is coming. They're bringing all this stuff back. So everyone's primed for the Great Awakening, which is when the deep state's revealed. And then Trump comes out and he's like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and let Diddy go. Oh, okay. The Willy Wonka connection with Elon Musk. No, I'm not making this up. What I say when I say these things, I'm just talking about this construct they've given us. So a few years ago, when he was hyping up the Hyperloop and the Boring Company, he had toyed with the idea of creating a candy company. And I was thinking, okay, well, Hyperloop, the tunnels underground, the candy company, there might be something connected to this because it got Willy Wonka's underground candy factories, the chocolate factory, but you access it by that tunnel, and they go on these boats that go with these really extreme speeds. So I'm thinking this might be some kind of relationship here with Willy Wonka, because when you get down to it, Willy Wonka is another one of these, like Mad Hatter to Alice, Charlie to Willy Wonka, Dorothy to the Wizard of Oz. Various examples we have of the boss of the underworld, Pope Elon. And the underworld is this alternate reality, but the association of candy with that made me think, of course, Willy Wonka. And I thought so at the time because he was buying Gene Wilder's home. And there were articles about how he was obsessed with this person for some reason. So it has here, Elon Musk is foreclosing on the home owned by Gene Wilder. This was in 2020. But this is an association that was intentionally made. And I think when you look at how their persona is engineered. For example, when Robert Downey Jr. Was asked about how he came up, how he performed as Iron Man, what his inspiration was. His inspiration for Tony Stark was Elon Musk. So the actor who's playing the movie Iron Man character is getting his inspiration from Elon Musk, which sounds like a Tony Stark, which just, it's absurd on the face of it, but it's part of building this notion up that he's like Tony Stark, this billionaire engineer genius who can do all these miraculous things. Tomanoid says Willy Wonka Book 2 is the glass elevator. Yeah, the glass elevator thing has been a topic here for a few reasons. And I was doing some deep dives into the symbolism inherent in elevators, according to James Shelby Downard from King Kill 33. But the glass elevator at the Space Needle opened on the 23rd, and it's this double-decker glass elevator, and there's got to be some significance to it. In fact, somebody in our Gilded, we're moving over to Discord, by the way. Gilded is not good enough to do the types of interactions that we're getting into with the voice chats. But we have some information about the elevator. But anyway, it's significant here that they just opened up this double-decker glass elevator paid for with $100 million from the Century Project, and the movie is about the opening night of their Skyview. So Skyliner, Skyview, overlapping dates, and then the Space Needle actually posted an image of their restaurant and compared it to the one from the movie. World-renowned psychics predict apocalyptic end to 2025. Yeah, I'm really only interested in short-term predictions, or like, in other words, if it's 2027, 2029, I can't even get excited about it. Somebody said that in 2027 the UFO's arriving. I'm like, okay, slow news day. Now, this is from Downard, James Shelby Downard, who wrote King Kill 33. And the significance of it, of that particular article, it's one of the first what we'd call metascript breakdowns. And it's the ritualistic subtext in the JFK assassination, as interpreted through the lens of, I would say, Fraser's Golden Bow, and then the Masonic rituals, and some Wizard of Oz stuff, some Macbeth. Really intriguing connections. Not unlike what we are doing here. In fact, I would say he was pretty much the first one to do this. And Downard's theory about this is that it was psychological warfare, but more specifically, he called it Masonic sorcery. And he said the purpose of these rituals wasn't just political, but the occulty stuff and the references to these various rituals and all this is designed, he said, to control the dreaming mind, which I think means he's referring to perhaps this in your face, we're in control, but it's, you can't even say anything about it, kind of like cognitive dissonance inducing levels of meaning and subtext that shouldn't even be there. Because every time we see examples of what we would call predictive programming and the media notices it, they call it eerie coincidence. But his take on it is that on some level, people know it couldn't possibly be an eerie coincidence, but they can't get themselves to contemplate what it really means. That's why I say it's important to look past the limited hangouts. It's like, okay, you're trying to argue with people, are there crisis actors or aren't there? Well, let's just say that there is. Go deeper. If true, then what? Well, if true that Trump did fake his ear wound, then what? Well, then the Secret Service was in on it. Well, then who wouldn't have been in on it? And then you find out, that's the shorter list, who wasn't in on it at that event. But anyway, here's what he wrote. Elevators, he considered them more than just simple mechanical devices in his... And think about how they're used in movies. Even in Kubrick films, like The Shining with the elevators, they open up and the blood dumps out. But he says, in his conversations, elevators were discussed alongside other objects like the theremin musical instrument and the circus, all of which he believed contained occult significance. For downward, elevators represented moving between levels seen as symbolic ascent or descent, common motifs in esoteric traditions and Masonic ritual, when the journey upward or downward signifies initiation or descent into hidden knowledge. And this idea of descent, of course, ties into a lot of the, Persephone, underworld stuff. A lot of these themes that are tied into these movies have to do with this underworld or alternate reality, Oz. And this is what I think is ultimately being conveyed with this whole drama. These psychological operations is we're being told who runs it, where it's going, and we're just complicit in it. What's up, Rocky USA? Talmud, it says the Iron Man is coming back as evil Doctor Doom Nazi. I'll have to check it out. Has anyone looked into the Golden Dome? There's been some talk about this Golden Dome. So they're setting the stage, it seems, for Space Wars. And at the beginning of this movie, Final Destination, I was talking about the trailers. And one of the trailers is Fantastic Four. And this is just a reoccurring theme. Spectacular explosions in the sky above a city, and then global blackouts. Enex says, Alice Bailey said the externalization of the hierarchy would happen in 2025. Said in the 20s. Did she specify 2025? The New Age movement, and this was really also exemplified by Aleister Crowley, is based on the idea that the old age was typified as being secretive, and everything was occult and underground. And in the New Age, everything would be revealed. So Isis unveiled the notion that the secrets would be revealed and it would somehow enlighten mankind. And it seems like the information age, Aquarius, the deluge of information, it seems like it is the plan. Lord Laney says, even the word eerie, EE backwards is 33, cognitive dissonance-inducing word. That's why it's always an eerie coincidence. That's good. We say eerie coincidence in quotes because we have noted this relationship between movies and fake news. But the ones that get the media attention these days aren't these Simpsons episodes from 50 years ago, but the real-time stuff like, oh, Netflix just happened. Oh, look what happened again, Netflix. And that's why I've been calling this planet Netflix. I watched Rebel Ridge. It happens to Tyreek Hill. We talk about these numerous examples. And it's not just Netflix. I mean, Roe v. Wade leak happens alongside the HBO Game of Thrones, where the queen is dying in childbirth because they need the baby to be born, even if it kills her, just as the Roe v. Wade leak triggers these responses about this is going to happen to us, basically. So the media will notice these things, like white noise gets released, and it's about what just happened. And in that case, they're like, not only did white noise just happen in East Palestine, Ohio, but many of the actors from the movie had to be evacuated from the real thing. So is this life imitating Netflix? No. It's psyops imitating Netflix. But in every one of these instances, the media calls the coincidence, quote, eerie. Like, why eerie? And one of the common hoax codes, and this is just pattern recognition, 33. The number 33 is connected with nearly, well, even that latest one, the van attack in Liverpool. I stopped looking at it when I saw the big 33s on the truck. I'm like, oh, the hoax department. Nothing to see here. I mean, I'm all for examining the event and unpacking it. When here it is. The van hits Liverpool. But when I see that number, it's like, okay, we can relax. We'll just wait for more facts to come out because in all likelihood, it's a hoax because the Illuminati apparently can't help flashing their gang signs. New Wes Anderson coming out June 6th, says Michelle K. Now, the last Wes Anderson was the Asteroid City. And I have a lot to say about Asteroid City. And unfortunately, I wasn't alone when I watched it. And I had to leave early because everyone thought it was so terrible. But I missed the part where Margot Robbie shows up. I think that's the main thing I missed. But that would be significant. But Asteroid City, and this isn't really explicit stuff, but the main character is a Stanley Kubrick looking guy, and he's walking around with a camera. I'm pretty sure that's Kubrick. And then he falls in love with Scarlett Johansson's character, and they see the UFO in the desert. And I talked about the significance of Scarlett Johansson and the Scarlet Woman, Marjorie Cameron, the desert UFO stuff. It overlaps in a lot of interesting ways. But later, Fly Me to the Moon comes out. And Fly Me to the Moon is about NASA faking the moon landing, having enlisted the help of Stanley Kubrick. And the movie is starring Scarlett Johansson. And several times throughout the movie, they joke about Stanley Kubrick. And there is an actor or a background character who looks like Stanley Kubrick every time they mention him. And I thought that can't be a coincidence that she's in two movies back to back. Asteroid City, Fly Me to the Moon, where Kubrick and the moon landing being faked is insinuated almost directly. I mean, I'd say it's a pretty direct reference. It's inferred. Michelle K. Again mentioned Wes Anderson having a new movie coming out June 6th, so that's definitely significant. And that Wes Anderson movie I alluded to, the Asteroid City, was really to me about the world stage fakery and the power of the camera to shape perception for the masses. I think that's what it really was about. It opens up with the scene of like a fake nuke in the background and the UFO thing. So there's a scene where the UFO, the alien, descends. Well, everyone is out there to observe some celestial event that requires that they put a box over their heads with little holes punched in it so they can observe. So I'm looking at, there's a room full of people with cubes on their heads. And the significance, I think, has to do with the head in the camera, in the viewfinder, the worldview monopoly exercised through total control of media. And when they all put the cubes on their heads, the hexagonal UFO descends, which has a lot of Saturnian implications. But we'll leave it at that for now. J. Dig says the 8647 from Comey. Yeah, that's a big one too. So James Comey, and not only that, James Comey's an author. I haven't read any of his books, but in one of his books, it involves stochastic violence in order to cause the elimination of some right-wing nut job. That was the story in one of his books. So here he is putting 8647, which is a threat to Trump. That's how it's been taken. The Secret Service even checked it out. And it was 8,647 days after 9/11. And I've been saying for some time that the Trump head wound thing is a 9/11ing of America. Like the George Floyd death. A 9/11ing of America. That's just kind of a code, I think, or the way I'm using it is that it's like a big psyop. And that's why in Butler, Trump had the 4547 on the side of his head. That's 9/11. The photographer that photographed the bullet whizzing by his ear, was it Richard Gill? The same one who photographed George Bush on 9/11 when the Secret Service was whispering into his ear. So the whispering in the ear, the bullet whizzing by the ear, same photographer, another 9/11 connection. But the 9/11 stuff is always relevant here because it's a common directorship. But the fact that, again, it was exactly that many days from 9/11, how can that not be a message? Lieutenant Weinberg says, Downerd in King Kill 33 also said that the omnipotent force behind the Kennedy assassination was carried out to be cruel. Well, it is cruel, if you think about it. I mean, the idea of atrocity propaganda, yeah, there's some cruelty to it. The spectacle of it. Same thing with the George Floyd event, the spectacle, which is the whole point. 9/11, the towers falling. It's really about the traumatic injury, the traumatic visuals that you take in. This is the MK Ultra. If you ask me, MK Ultra isn't somebody being programmed like a Manchurian candidate and losing all agency. I don't think that's what it really is. I think it has to do with uh, giving us associations in our subconscious, just essentially warping our reality by having preloaded us with associations that will be brought forth to influence how we interpret current events. And you can't say we're not mass mind controlled. Like if there's any case to be made for MK Ultra applied to the billions, just look at 2020. And even the resistance was totally controlled. The anti. That's why I say I'm anti-anti. Anti-anti, anti-pro. They were billions in compliance. The true outliers numbered in the tens of thousands, if that. Non-participants, uninformed, don't count as resistance. The only ones who could be considered outside of the PSYOP are those who are cognizant of the world stage as such. In other words, recognizing the fakery and not acting as though there is real deaths occurring without sufficient evidence. And all we found were twerking nurses in empty hallways. Tominoid3 says, Barbieheimer fake nukes in Asteroid City while Scarlet fakes moons. Okay. Yeah, the Margot Robbie character in Barbie is a whole other trail to go down, but it's totally worth it. Because we can't separate these things. And what it ties into is this religion, which I call Nasatology. And I call it that jokingly, but that's an apt description. Nasatology is the de facto world religion. Space is the new heaven, and it has all the God constructs of the old paradigms, but made up now with science fiction. Like aliens are angels for the atheists. And there are many examples of this. But beneath the facade of a science fiction religion, there is in fact an esoteric. I would actually classify if I was an alien anthropologist, I would classify NASA as an Egyptian mystery school. And I would even say that SpaceX is probably more leaning into Thelema. And when I characterize Musk, I would throw in a dose of Jack Parsons for that reason. And I was also thinking about, too, in the Thelemic concept, the beast, you got Babylon and the beast. So they appropriate from all these other traditions, Osiris and Isis, Christ, Magdalene. Well, in this newest iteration, it's Babylon and the beast. And that's one of the significances of Barbie, played by Margot Robbie. Barbie is a modern iteration of the goddess in this new paradigm. And it's interesting that Musk, I think, in all of this, he's an interesting character. But if we go back and you look at some of his publicity stunts, do you remember when he came out in the suit of armor, the red suit of armor? Well, he bought it at a Halloween store in New York called Abracadabra, which is a Thelemic code word in itself. But he's been described, of course, as the Elon of Mars, the Elon, the dictator, first dictator of Mars in von Braun's book. And he's also called himself the Imperator, like the Emperor from Mad Max. But in that suit of armor, he associated himself with the Emperor Tarot card, which is the fourth card, and it's associated with Mars, as is Musk, and with Aries, the ram. And in all the tarot cards, if you look at the Emperor, he'll have a ram on his armor, or on his shield, or on his throne. And Musk had the red suit of armor, and it wasn't a Baphomet head, as people said. No, it's a ram's head. And there was something else, too. There's a timestamp on his watch. But anyway, the red suit of armor and the ram is enough to make the Mars Tarot association in the context of Thelema and Kabbalistic magic, which then you add on to it the fact that he bought it at a store called Abracadabra. And there's even more. When you go into, like, Game of Thrones, Westeros, the Iron Throne, the Iron Man association is relevant here because Mars is associated with iron. And there was this there's an image going around where they found the House of Stark emblem from Game of Thrones on Mars in some kind of a geographical feature. But Tony Stark, Iron Man, House of Stark, Iron Throne. Like there's overlapping entertainment universe symbolism with the NASA stuff. They're constantly making these connections, and that's just this. But the significance is this: at the end of Game of Thrones, Westeros burns, and you have what looks to be like fallout, and the whole theme is winter is coming. What happens after the nukes? The whole nuclear winter. And so Westeros is burning, which I think signifies, of course, the West. And after the West burns, what comes next? Well, that's the age of Mars. So if you look at this New Age concept, the New Age is actually about the age of Horus, the age of God, the god of Mars. And Mars is the next age, meaning the New Age has a new god, and it's Mars, meaning they're going to make Earth Mars. So I kind of look at it as the New Age is the post-apocalypse. And the apocalypse is really just the deconstruction of our old paradigm, which they're obviously deep into. Marcel says Mars is the war god, if you have to believe it. Well, we also have that the war aspect, some agrarian stuff. It makes perfect sense if you look at the Mars bases, how they're basically like gulags. I mean, space communism is the model. The Red Planet. There's a book called The Red Star about a communist Mars setting the standards for how we live here on Earth. Like some scientist goes out there. This came out of Russia, like in 1908 or something, and it's called The Red Star. And it's about Earth scientists going to Mars in order to figure out how to implement communism here. And this is not a new concept. I've always pointed out how the right-wingers are quick to say climate change is a hoax, and they reject the whole agenda, the green agenda. But they believe in the space program. And you cannot separate the space program from the goals of environmentalism, sustainability, this new model of life. Like, you're not taking your internal combustion engine and your wardrobe and your smartphones to Mars. You're going to go live in a very stripped down subterranean communal life. But they've managed to convince free people who believe in free market and using the resources of the world to embrace the ideal of the green ascetics. Leo says, are you taking calls from Discord? I'm not sure if I'm logged in on this computer. Oh, actually, I probably could be. I could. So I was thinking of Gilded. I just don't know if the browser can take it. I haven't been able to play any video or audio. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of it when I have time. But I remember a time when I used to play videos, audio clips, and it wouldn't result in instant buffering. So I'm hoping to figure this out in the next couple of days. Okay, moving on. I noticed a lot of Obama mentions. And one of the subtexts to the Trump head wound thing is that Obama is the ultimate culprit. And I talked about how he embodies one pole, Trump another, 1619 versus 1776. And I find a lot right now in order that kind of substantiates that. The black eye phenomenon. Elon Musk reveals truth behind the mystery black eye during White House farewell. So it's also the farewell thing too. So he's out of the White House, but now he's in the Black Eye Club. And it looks to me like a teardrop on his right eye. But this is where Trump's foreshadowed head wound would be. And the character in Megalopolis, Caesar Catalina, played by Adam Driver, actually gets hit right there. And then he has the miraculous healing. Starship is going to have how many engines? How many engines is it going to have? Anybody want to answer? There's 2 answers I'll accept. Thank you, Marcel. RJ, Citizen Z, Jennifer Reeves, Brock Till Payday, and T-Rex in Space have all received the blue wrenches. And by the way, if you have the blue wrench on YouTube, you can now access the member post that will give you the link to get into the Discord server. So you can access the Discord server through YouTube if you're a Blue Wrench Lodge member. So this new server is just that. It's new. It's ground zero, but it's not going to go away. I have the keys to it. I can moderate it, and it's going to stick to MSM-. It's a place for skeptics of mass media. I realize a lot of people are still addicted to the red pills. A lot of people are still alt-woke, red pill woke, and that's fine. QAnons, chemtrail believers, Mandela affected, confused people, that's all fine. There's a place for everybody, but just not here. And it's a quality control thing. And it's unlikely that people who aren't up to speed are going to want to get in anyway, but it's going to grow on the basis of MSM-. So we're not here to wake people up or catch people up, but rather to just engage in the work of metascript analysis. Like if you're not at the level of metascript, you're not really caught up. Yeah, everybody knows predictive programming. Concurrent programming is cutting edge. And I don't know any other group that's noticing that. I mean, some people are noticing significant instances of it, but the prevalence of it, or not the prevalence, but how it's systemic fakery, how these alignments are a facet of media. It's actually part of the design. It's a feature, not a bug. But beyond that, metascript breakdown, I think, is even more significant, because now we're getting into what's the big story. Like, what is the script of fake history that is being performed in front of our eyes day after day after day? The answer to the question here is 42 engines. The Starship will have 42 engines. I think previously it was 33. It was like Starship ignites all 33, and we were talking about the significance of that. They added 9 more, and it will be 142 meters tall. Now, of course, people are noticing this because, Elon Musk, 42, inside sci-fi joke. If they only knew, it's not about the sci-fi joke, which does relate to the computer called deep thought at the center of the universe. But so you bring in the AI stuff again, the Hell 9000 thing. But no, the 42 is really a reference to Saturn, if you ask me. One of their gods. James Fetzer said the Alex Jones conviction has been reversed. He had it right the first time. It was a staged event. Well, no, he never actually said that. Alex Jones has backtracked 100%. He was never fully on board with calling that event fake or staged. He's still in the camp that children died. And he can somehow sleep at night. Because if I thought children died in that event, I would have a completely different attitude about it. Because you could really ask some serious questions. People think people die at PSYOPs. That's antiquated thinking in 2025. But let's say you still believe people die in PSYOPs. Here are just some of the problems with that proposition. It is legal to do propaganda films. It is legal to do mass casualty simulations and lie about them. The DHS involves itself with the media and they portray these events, but there's nobody actually dying, because for somebody to die would turn a propaganda event into a murder scene. And not only that, now everybody is implicated in what you could call even possibly a war crime, but any illegal activity invalidates NDAs. So what would be the incentive for some low-level crisis actor to not blow the whistle if 50 people got gunned down? What kind of people would be able to live with themselves? So the question of how come there aren't any whistleblowers when it comes to these events? There's a couple of answers. One, these aren't real atrocities. There's no whistle to blow. There's no crimes being committed. And two, the people involved are in their own way insulated, like the movie Utopia. We're talking about the intelligence agencies and their children. I mean, one of the most famous crisis actors who's really made it big on the world stage now in politics, David Hogg, his dad was FBI. I mean, it's a common thing. Jay Diggs, good call here. Alex Jones promoted the extra shooter in the woods at first, MSM Plus. Yeah, so the second shooter narrative is pushed by InfoWars every time. They were pushing, look at the water tower. So here we're looking at the fake staged event, and Alex Jones and company a week later are still looking at videos of who's that guy on the water tower. Now, the term MSM Plus refers to you don't trust what the news says, so you add on. But you do believe what the news says happened, but you think they're lying. So we agree that people got shot, but we don't agree that it's the guy they said. So then you have to add on. You have to fill in for the gaps in the story. And this is termed conspiracy theory. Our approach is MSM minus. So you take the mainstream version and then you subtract what you can't verify. And what you can't verify would be actual deaths, unless you can. But if you can't, then you don't have to act as though it's real. You don't have to participate in that scenario. You don't have to treat it like it really happened. So we take away the trust and the faith that we're trained to have in media and shift the burden of proof back to them. So no, you're the ones with the conspiracy theories until you prove otherwise. Okay, let's see what else we have here. I don't know if this is interesting, but I just marked it. Filmmaker Mike DeGroy died in 2012 with Andrew White in a helicopter crash. Andrew White was the producer of a 3D film Sanctum and a close friend of James Cameron. And what he was investigating was what some believe to be some kind of barrier at the bottom of the ocean. Killed for discovering the firmament is what the video here says. But I'm bringing this up just because of the mention of James Cameron and his deep sea dives. And of course, the Titan disaster from a couple of years ago. A pop quiz. How many times did James Cameron go down to the wreckage of the Titanic? Okay, yeah, phone's open. I don't know why it wasn't ringing. Hopefully it's working just fine. 505-510-4226. We're only 11 days out from June 11th, Seattle Space Needle hypothetical situation. Not a lot of time. And this has been an annual thing. And this year, we have to really, I think, call out people who start announcing it, but not citing their reasoning. This happens every year. Like August 4th, you get all these gematria number calculator people who start saying such and such is going to happen. And it's like, where'd you get that information? Like, I just thought of it. My gematria calculator. It's like, no, you're stealing from Jurassic Liars. Hey, what's up, caller? Can you hear me okay? I think, just give it a second.
I'm speaking.
Okay, yeah.
Hello?
Okay. Hey, what's up, Leo Pirate?
Hey, so yeah, something I wanted to talk about regarding crisis actors and psyops. You know, the penalty of perjury. What it is you can only be prosecuted for perjury when you're under oath, or under in a courtroom, for example, right? So these news entertainment or organizations that are reporting to us these psyops, I am perfect in agreement with you that these aren't crimes according to their legalese, to their very kind of snake-like wording of the event. So they see it in that way. But someone in chat had mentioned earlier about Alice Bailey's writings and how 2025 would be the year. I'd like to read a quote from her writings that kind of makes it kind of interesting. So this is a quote from, I believe, which was the book? This is from, I don't have the citation on me right now. I was looking at it, but the way she described it is that in 2025, the date in all probability will be set for the first stage of the externalization of the hierarchy. The present cycle from now until that date is called technically the stage of the forerunner, in that it is preparatory in nature, testing the methods, and intended to be revelatory in its techniques and results. And what I think is that, I've talked to you about this before, Tim, is that there might be like an expose of the world stage, but in a controlled manner that would lead people into this trap, new system that would basically prevent such a thing from ever happening again on their terms.
Now, they said 2025 specifically.
At least that's what I'm seeing. I want to get the actual book that was written from it, because I know she had published it. It was like, I think it was called The Masters of Wisdom. No. I wish I had the actual like book page number and quote on me. Usually I'm good about that.
Well,
This
but
is being produced from a specific.
I have Perplexity on my phone, so I'll just ask Perplexity. Tell me about the externalization of the hierarchy 2025, Alice Bailey. Okay, let's see what we got here. The concept of the externalization of the hierarchy in 2025 is rooted in the teachings of Bailey, prominent writer in Theosophy and New Age movements. According to her, the Great White Brotherhood is a group of advanced spiritual beings and ascended masters from behind the scenes. They had a general assembly of the hierarchy every 100 years. The next assembly is 2025. At this meeting, it's a pivotal moment for humanity. The hierarchy will assess the progress of all of the kingdoms and set the stage for the spiritual figures making their presence and influence more visible. So the aliens, or the reappearance of Christ. But in other words, the hidden white hats, perhaps. But this is the year that they're going to show themselves. Fascinating. Probably at the Super Bowl.
Well, it's for me, it's kind of what we've talked about before, the white hats and black hats. It's like this, what I see it is a system of good and evil, and then underneath evil is the white hats and black hats. Like, we live in a world where good and evil is still under the umbrella of uppercase E, evil. And choosing good or evil within this system, it's still evil. But people don't know that.
Oh, yeah.
They've been fed a
Yes.
false version of good. Yeah.
No, like, I talk about this all the time.
And
how the truthers think that since they're the anti-position, that they're fighting the bad guys, so they're good. The QAnon thinks, oh, we're the good guys. Well, not really. You've been drafted into the army of endarkment without even knowing it.
yeah, and I know that this audience really does not like my take about this, but kind of like how you've been doing metascript research, I've been doing meta-religion research, like looking at the similarities across world religions and noting the distinct contrast to biblical Christianity, not Catholicism, not world stage Christianity. And something that I've noticed is the false prophecies that are manifested on the world stage are syncretized versions of the real prophecies described in the record. Basically, prophecies that are in the Bible happen in reality. They actually do happen. It's much more than history books or the screen. It actually occurs. And we're talking about the succession of kingdoms. And something I find particularly troubling, Tim, is some of the prophecies that are described in the Bible are actually seen repurposed as positive prophecies in world religions. Mormonism in particular talks about America eventually getting a perfect government. There was this idea that America is essentially going to have the perfect government. And I find that troubling because in Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall, that's also a concept he talks about. Manly P. Hall talked about the perfect system of judges that the Egyptians had. And that's really the end goal of America, to basically have this perfect court system that would be democratized, that would basically always be working and be a perfect form of government. And, when you think of America being the new Atlantis, I'm sure you've heard that before, right? America being the new Atlantis.
Yes, we've talked about that in significance
It's
of
probably
the where you've got this the idea of Atlantis sinking. Atlantis, of course, has this backstory, but it's been alluded to with James Cameron and Avatar 2. Avatar 2 being the way of water, and the correlation with Atlanta and the Cop City riots. But yeah, America as Atlantis is one of the themes. Of course, Atlantis sunk beneath the ocean, like the Titanic sinking beneath the ocean.
Yeah, it's actually incredible because when you do research into Plato's writings, you actually realize that Atlantis is a syncretized version of the antediluvian world, of the biblical antediluvian world, which is very briefly mentioned in Genesis. It doesn't actually have a lot of description, but for all intents and purposes, Atlantis is in the Bible. It's in Genesis chapter 6. And the people of the time before the flood were so technologically advanced. They lived for hundreds of years. They all spoke one language. That's another interesting aspect. They all spoke one language, but because of their state of being, it was a flood that had wiped them out. Now, the Atlantis version that Plato describes in others, yeah, it was a deluge that submerged it. And it's curious that when you look at Freemasonic writings, they actually want to bring Atlantis back, the new Atlantis. Are going to make that without their moral shortcomings or technological implosion that leads to a deluge, right? America will be the
Yes.
perfect version of that. Well, that's troubling because Jesus, the real Jesus, not the world stage Jesus, not the fake one that's going to, appear in all of the world stage. He said when he returns, it'll be as it was in the days of Noah and the days of Lot. Two of those in particular. I'm not going to days of Lot, whatever. But the days of Noah, that's the antediluvian.
Okay,
world.
wait. The days of Lot. So I remember this was mentioned a lot. I used to listen to various YouTube preachers. Wasn't that associated with some kind of a nuke situation? Have you heard that association between?
If you could. If you could repurpose, the raining of fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah as a nuke. Yes, you could repurpose it that way. But yeah, the people, both the days of Noah and the days of Lot, are two types representing the state of the entire world at the true end of time. And we're seeing the days of Lot manifest really in Europe, all around the world. But the days of Noah is an era of prosperity and false religion. Because in the days of Noah, there wasn't a single atheist. Before the flood, there was not a single atheist. So all the people in the days of that time, they all believed in a God or some kind of God, but it was obviously a warped perception. And I'm seeing that uniquely emerge in America. Atheism is on the rise everywhere else in the world. In America, not so much. You have this Christian nationalism movement. You have Mormonism seeping its way into the government.
Yeah, and I'm going to add too that it's kind of like common. You'll hear non-atheists say that atheists, that they have their own kind of de facto religion, and I tend to agree that even if you don't explicitly believe in a higher power or God or gods, just by being programmed by media, you do tacitly accept the existence of various God constructs. So insofar as religions are used to create constructs to boss around the sheeple, there are plenty of gods ruling over you right now. Gaia, gotta recycle. Gaia is going to flood you. You've got the COVID, which is more of a devil, but everyone believes in. It's a devil they can believe in. They've produced eschatologies, and of course we have the space heaven, which I alluded to earlier, and the religion of nasatology that will get us to this paradise.
Yeah, and then the nuke god. I find it very curious that the first test site, James Shelby Downard had also mentioned this, the first nuclear test site in New Mexico is called the Trinity test site. And Tim, I will say this, and for everyone who's watching, the one common link amongst all forms of false Christianity, it doesn't matter what denomination, Catholic, Protestant, Pentecostal, Mormon, whatever, they all have some version of a Trinity God, which is not biblical. And I think the only cult that doesn't do that is Jehovah's Witnesses, and they have a bunch of other problems. But other than that, all forms of Christianity have embraced this idea of a Trinity God, a three-in-one.
Well, that's actually
the Trimurti.
It's in Thelema as well. It's Isis, Apophis, Osiris, and this is a reoccurring theme, this Trinity thing. But I was trying to find some information on it. I'll probably dig into it later, where John Dee had this particular form of Christianity, but he had this idea of a fourth. But yeah, this is also prevalent in New Age stuff. Some even say that you've got the Masonic deity, Jabulon, combination of Jehovah, Baal, and On, just some sort of like amalgamation.
Yes, yes, and I just think it's not it's not a mistake that a God construct like the nuke is tied to the Trinity, because in one of Donald Trump's first, remember when Trump and Vance went on Joe Rogan? That was one of the most viewed Joe Rogan episodes. I have a clip of it where Trump conspicuously brings up there are these prophets, and you know that Israel, the nuke, and so perfectly lining up with what Downard had mentioned in his essay that I think it was the foreword, the introductory by Michael Hoffman, I think. But it was something along the lines of the fall of the West will conclude with the nuclear curtains closing on Jerusalem. And here's Trump basically talking about the same thing.
Well, East Palestine, Ohio, of course, was 42 miles from where Butler was shot. Where Trump was shot in Butler. And this was highlighted by the news as this significant 42-mile stretch for the election. But, of course, East Palestine, Ohio was represented in white noise. What happened in Butler was represented in the megalopolis. And both these movies starred Adam Driver playing. And so, of course, you have the Trump-Adam Driver connection. And now you have the Trump connection with the head wound and the nuke. And it's East Palestine, Ohio. And I when I saw that, I thought, okay, this has to, and this is before 10/7. And 10/7 happened after the East Palestine thing. But the main feature of it was a big mushroom cloud. And I thought, this could be portentous of a couple of things. Ohio being the heart of it all, the heart of America. And so if you look back, well, it could in a way reference Israel, perhaps.
Yeah, isn't it 42 miles between East Palestine and Butler? I'm
Yes.
sorry, no.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that
Yeah, exactly.
the most important
Exactly.
42?
That was the whole point, was that it's another example of where you have the consistent relationship that these two events are in tandem, the Trump head wound and the nuke. And this is why I think it really stands out that in Final Destination, they show you the penny with the Lincoln head superimposed over the exploding Space Needle UFO. So now you have this nuke scenario superimposed with an assassination scenario. So there seems to be a pairing here that's consistently represented.
Because the main thing is we have been extensively, and we still are, deconstructing these psyops, and it's a great thing that the Discord's coming back. What I'm really concerned with is where is it heading towards? What is it pushing? That alchemical transformation in the American population, what will it essentially, what's the word I'm looking for, encourage? And I think with the complete destruction of anonymity, we will always be in a perpetual courtroom. Basically it'll be illegal to lie. You'll always be able to verify what someone says if they have persistently tied to who they are. It'll be impossible to commit any crime. Basically it'll be perfect government through enforcement. But the problem is you can't change the fallen nature of man through government, right? I don't know if you know that. It's a perfect system of government that always enforces and punishes crime still doesn't change the nature of someone who has a tendency to do that. And I think that's ultimately what these psyops are leading to, a new form of some kind of board of judges, much like the Sanhedrin Council.
Hasn't
or
that
the Kurtocracy the Israelites originally had?
Yeah, exactly. It seems like it's one of the goals of religion, the perfection of man, creating heaven on earth. And I think they want to have us live on earth as they do on Mars. So Mars, like I mentioned, the red star, it's this blueprint utopia. This is the perfect way to live. And so the perfect way to live here on earth is going to be consistent with the values of the age of Mars. And if you look in their own books, their own documents, and the New Age thing, it does involve some kind of fundamental transformation. And it was explained to me by cultists before I joined in the initial interviews with the Lemite group. They said that in their belief system, man is going through these collective changes, that we went through an age ruled by a goddess and the subconscious, and then we're through the age of the light and the sun god, and now we're going to the new age of their child, who represents a fusion of the two. So they call it an androgen. And they said, so in their view, the age of Mars, the new age, is going to have a new god that is somehow fundamentally transforming all mankind. And I think this ties in to a lot of the recent social changes and how things are being reframed, like fundamental changes. And it seems to me that this is consistent with Alice Bailey and her writings about the externalization of the hierarchy, because it's not like this new age stuff is some fringe, because it's pervasive, and it's a continuation of something older, and the media is an extension of it. It's not separate from it. Media is the state church for planet Earth.
Yeah, and I guess what I've found just so horrific in my studies of, the Book of Mormon is just how backwards it is. First of all, it's ties to Masonry. And I'm sure you know the gavel, that's just a common symbol in Masonry. And I actually attended you as well, like a Mormon Sunday service. If you've ever seen their churches, their sanctuary, it looks like a courtroom, like where they hold service. It really does. And it's like if you were just to remove all the pageantry of Catholicism, their long robes, and make them look like businessmen in a courtroom, that's what a Sunday service looks like. But the curious thing is, in the story of the Israelites, they were freed from slavery in Egypt, and they were originally given a system of judges, the Critarchy that they had. That's what the book of Judges is about. Then, by the time the prophet Samuel came around, they asked for a king. And then you had your first king, Saul, and then David, Solomon, whatever. But they first had judges and then kings. In the Book of Mormon, it describes it in, Zarahemla, if you will, America. They originally had kings, and then they go to judges. So it's like an inversion of the Old Testament narrative is what happens here in America, according to their view. And that's really what Mormonism wants to head towards. You'll hear that all the time. I think even William Cooper has an episode on like the secret doctrines of Mormonism. I used to have it up on my channel, but they really do want to establish perfect government. And
Interesting.
when I see Mormonism, it's just Masonry.
Now, the other day I mentioned this. On 6/14, Flag Day, the 250th anniversary of the American military, there's going to be these massive parades, and it's going to, coincide with Trump's birthday. But there's a nationwide protest called No Kings. So now Trump was being ridiculed with a crown of taco shells. And I said, hey, this is weird, because I was just reading The Golden Bow about the killing of the Sun King rituals that Downward references in King Kill 33, specifically Osiris as a corn god and the significance of corn. So I'm like, wait, King, Osiris, Trump, crown of corn tortillas. This is a little odd. Why would he be represented as a sacrificial king? And then you have 2 weeks from now a nationwide protest against him as a king. So even a flippant graphic on the Drudge Report doesn't seem so flippant, but it seems like another indicator of where the story is headed. Do you agree?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. It's so consistent. When I had read Downward's paper because of your recommendation early in near the end of 2024, it really stuck out to me how similar the decoration is of Trump as it was for JFK. And we're seeing it on a whole new level, because in the days of JFK, it was in the 60s. They didn't have, right, smartphones, social media. There was no Drudge Report imagery, right? People only saw in the newspaper or maybe on TV. But it's like we're seeing this pairing of Trump with Lincoln, with JFK imagery. And now even Synchromorpheus is really good at pointing out even news articles use like some kind of imagery with Trump, always some subtly associating with his death. But the king imagery is important, because I could never imagine America having a king, right? Like there was a Time magazine cover where they said, long live the king, and they had Trump as the emperor at around the time Pope Francis had, started getting sick. It's not long lasting, basically. Like Trump as being the American emperor, it's not gonna last. He's gonna be probably taken out, and it'll be leading to this like new perfect system.
as
I mean, when I
per
say perfect, I mean in air quotes,
well,
what they're trying to establish.
as per Megalopolis, because Caesar, Catalina Trump, gets the eye wound, and then he resurrects. And they at the end of the movie, they change the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag to the Pledge of Allegiance to humanity. So this is some transition from individual rights to collective rights. There's this the make Rome great again. Rome falls, but then it becomes a global thing, and he reigns over it. And then the Golden Age thing. I was thinking about the Golden Dome tying into this because the end of Megalopolis is Saturnalia, the festival where the Elvis character is singing. And I'm thinking, wait, Saturnalia, Saturn.
Yes.
There's a lot of Golden Age references there as well, but definitely it does seem to me that this falls, and then whatever happens next is global.
Yep, and it's going to involve lots of all the like America is the center of the world stage. So whatever is coming, if not this year, just in the future in this term, it will involve the eyes of the whole world. And yeah, I just wanted to put that out there just because I
Okay,
do think
and
there is
let me
that.
get your thought on
That's
this.
ultimately what I think these psyops are working towards.
Before, yeah, I was gonna get your thing on the boat. So the Mexican naval ship crashing into the Brooklyn Bridge. One of the deceased's name is America, so that kind of ties it into the Francis Scott Key Bridge national anthem. So Death of America, you kind of see it there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just the death of America, the fall of the old West, right? And the new emerging system will be a unified version of it, and it's so amazing how consistent it was. And we first got it. The first blow to America was the 9/11. I think the next blow will be whatever comes next. That's when it's
and
just going to totally go off, and we need to.
with the boat, you got three masts. So three masts, and then it hits the bridge. I was told they over or underestimated it by 33 feet or something. But anyway, three masts, and America dies. And I'm thinking this could easily tie into the three masts of the Space Needle. And after the boat hit the Brooklyn Bridge, I was comparing the falling sailors to the movie poster for Final Destination, where people are falling into the skull's mouth. So there was this theme here, again, connecting that event with the Final Destination. And then we have the America, Death of America, kind of encoded into it. And three masts seems to be possibly a Space Needle reference. But anyway, appreciate the call and the information. It's just a few days away. And I'll post a link to your Space Needle article again. Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch, and keep up the work. So peace. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Leo Pirate. Again, highly informative. So yes, recent events, a boat crashing into a bridge, seeming to have some ominous subtext. Didn't know one of the deaths was somebody named America. And it did have some overlap, some symbolic overlap with the destruction of the Space Needle from Final Destination, with the Space Needle being an analogous symbol to the One World Trade Tower. Or the West, the I guess you would call it, the West right now, but the Tower of Babel just is a kind of a biblical symbol that's been appropriated. And when I say it's been appropriated and superimposed, it's through syncretism. And there are various ways that we arrive at this, but it's pretty blatant once you see it, and it reiterates itself oftentimes. So, for example, the One World Trade Tower being 1776 feet high, and from up close, and you can find this picture quite readily on online, just search. When you get up close, it happens to take on the appearance of a pyramid with the capstone. And the dollar bill pyramid of the capstone has in Roman numerals 1776 at the bottom. So that corresponds to the height of the tower, and of course the pyramid itself with the capstone. But if you go into the Masonic lore, it goes deeper, because the pyramid in Giza, the Great Pyramid, its height is 5,776 inches. So the bill says 1776. It's got a pyramid whose height is 5776. Well, that number actually does correlate to something here, because if you go by the Masonic calendar, there's a 4,000 year difference. So 1776 AD would actually be 5776 AL, which is again their year of light. The significance there is if you go back to 1776 AL, what do you get? Well, in their lore, post-flood, that's the construction date where the Tower of Babel's construction begins. So now you have a connection between the construction of the Tower of Babel and America. And then 9/11, New York, you do have at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, America represented as Babylon, and it's being destroyed. And this ties right in to Megalopolis with America as Rome, but this reoccurring imagery reinforces this idea that, of course, the 9/11 connection to America as Rome falling, reiterated in Francis Ford Coppola's film in a number of ways, a movie which was delayed because of 9/11. But Ground Zero is where they put the One World Trade Tower. So again, the Space Needle on the other side of the country would fulfill the same meaning. We're talking about the tower representing man's hubris, disobedience, in the sense of transgressing into the celestial realm, one language, one trip up, in contradiction to God's will, and then it gets knocked over. And this is kind of a story echoed with the sinking of the Titanic. So we're looking at the fall of the Tower of Babel, sinking of the Titanic, the destruction of the West, death of the West, overlapping themes. But as is described at the very beginning of Francis Ford Coppola's film Megalopolis, there's this monologue where it shows this. Well, this is the movie where the Russian satellite hits New York. But it's about how empires don't end all at once. And there's a process to telling the story and bringing it down, highlighting the characters that explain it and why it fell the way it did. Oh yeah, thank you. Truth Hurts. They're stopping production of the penny. And in their language, they're saying they're killing the penny. Trump killed the penny. And in that movie we referenced, the penny is a huge symbol, and it actually does cause the destruction of the tower. And I think it splits. Marcel says, could the Tower of Babel be the spine, the chakras? Bro Sanchez made a good point with that story. Probably could. I haven't heard that, though. I've heard Jacob's ladder. I've heard other biblical symbols being applied to it. Even the tree of life is superimposed with the chakra concept. And this is all stuff from Theosophy, the New Age. But someone had pointed out that if you look at the poster for the Final Destination movie, you got the Space Needle, and at the top there's a skull. And then there's the explosion of fire, the exploding Space Needle. But if you think about it, the idea of the Kundalini, the spine, the fire snake going up, it actually terminates at the base of the skull. So the exploding skull would represent higher consciousness. And this is a symbol we saw with that rapper, Lil Uzi Vert, who has that art with the mushroom cloud, but then it also has like an eyeball and like a brain over it. You know, kind of again reiterating the idea of mind blowing and the bomb and the expansion of consciousness all being tied together. And I think there's a reason for it. You know, this, we're talking about alchemy and the transformation of consciousness through mass psychological operations and what appears to be Masonic sorcery. But, you know, these terms, we're using them kind of loosely. Masonic, sorceress, thelemic, New Age, occultic. I mean, what do you want to call it? Witches and warlocks run the world. I mean, that's probably an accurate statement. And speaking of, the witch in Wicked at the end of the movie does the EMP and blacks out the Emerald City. And Seattle's called the Emerald City. And now she's working on being Jesus. So the Wicked Witch who nukes Seattle and has Elvis's birthday, another strange connection there, is now playing Jesus. So Jesus, Elvis, Wicked Witch, and the Nuking of Seattle, all kind of encoded in that actress and in her recent roles. Andrea says Penny is one of the main characters from The Big Bang Theory. I think the penny also ties into it. Of course, like I said, class warfare, Civil War, Lincoln, assassination, but also century and cent has been a reoccurring theme, and the number 100 has been consistently associated with this particular event. All right, let's see what else we have here. Yeah, the tree of life chakra thing connection has to do with the kingdom, the bottom, the Malkuth black, that is associated with the base, and then the crown, of course, I guess the top of the head, but that the spine and the 33 vertebrae has been connected with the path, and that's why that number is consistently used with ideas of ascension. And I suggest that this is why you have to go 33 times the speed of sound as the exit velocity to leave the earth. So in other words, to leave the material realm, to exit the kingdom and enter the celestial, you have to go Mach 33. And of course, at the top of the 33 vertebrae, you have the exploding skull symbol. That's kind of what I keep pointing out here. Like even with the space program, we're consistently seeing these numbers being referenced. It seems like space travel could actually be allegory for higher states of consciousness. When I say that NASA is a Egyptian mystery school, it's like, yeah, behind all the exoteric NASA-tology science fiction, it actually rests upon an edifice of the mystery school traditions and their esoterica and their beliefs about consciousness and what they term alchemy. All right, let's see what else we have here. Going through your comments. You know, when you get into the NASA stuff, there does seem to be something to it. The idea of space travel being allegory for higher states, and the idea of ascending the tree of life from the kingdom to the celestial is space travel. But in this case, the tree of life is a model for the mind and the soul. It's like a map of the I guess that's what you would call it. You know, it's the idea of the spirit or the soul being described as having several wheels or centers in the body or interfaces with the universe. But that ascending these different spheres, which correspond to planets, like the first one above the kingdom, number 9, is associated with the moon, for example. You got Mars. And so it seems like, wait, these are these spheres associated with the planets, and then you have the snake climbing the tree to reach the heavens. And I'm thinking that kind of looks like the NASA symbol, you know, the snake's tongue. And I do think it's esoteric. Like, so we can laugh at NASA and their silly special effects. You can look at Musk and think he's just a world stage Truman performing these roles. But behind it, there does seem to be something much darker. Do you all remember, and I'll have to go back and find these, when the astronauts used to play around on the space station with their iPads? They had these black iPads on, you know, like the black screen for the iPads and iPhones. But no, they had the iPads. And sometimes people had noticed reflections in the iPads. And it was going around for some time, Demons on the ISS, where people were finding clips where it looked like these faces reflected in the iPad, so that the astronauts are supposedly just looking at the camera. But if you go off of the reflections, it appeared to be perhaps that they were facing these individuals wearing these very strange eyes wide shut style Venetian masks. I thought more Hellraiser. But the viral videos were all about demons on the ISS, like the Cenobites, or Eyes Wide Shut, which made more sense to me, considering Stanley Kubrick, Moon Landing, Stanley Kubrick, Eyes Wide Shut. there seems to be maybe some continuity here. So we were trying to speculate what the hell is going on up there. I don't have an answer. I'm just saying. At one point, we were looking at what's going on. Are these the directors? Was it a glitch? Is it pareidolia? Or is there something else to it? I don't know. It's kind of ominous if you think about it. But for the record, like, I don't think anybody died in the Challenger or Apollo. I don't think they really do anything that nefarious. It's just what's really bad about them are their special effects. And we tend to be, more critics than anything here. We're not activists. We're not trying to wake people up. We're really just analyzing the propaganda and the big stories that are being told. And the space part of it really pertains to the big picture. That's where they set the world stage. That's where they say, this is where you live, and it's all going to end badly unless you pay a lot of taxes and let us regulate you. And you stop saying mean things on the internet. I mean, they are perfecting government, and they're perfecting their systems so fast. And AI might be the key. Maybe it is the thing that does it. Didn't Grimes talk about this? Remember Musk's his baby mama number 8 or whatever? Grimes. I don't know where she went off to. But there was this video where she was talking about how, and when you hear her talking, her cadence sounded like Musk. Clearly, she's hanging around him. And she said that they could use AI to perfect communism. And she said that forced labor is not a vibe. So we peasants don't have to worry. We're not going to be forced to do labor. It's no longer a vibe. But she said AI would remove the systemic corruption. And it would make it possible for us all just to spend our days sitting around making NFTs. Nobody would have to work anymore. And I thought that's probably the real plan. And she must have overheard something and just started spouting it on TikTok. Anyway, it's been nice not having to focus on Musk for a while, but now he's back in the headlines because of the black eye. I get Musk fatigue. I get Alex Jones fatigue, but they're both in the news today. So Alex Jones had his conviction more or less reversed, and Elon Musk has a black eye. Those are the two main developments right now. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow, and we'll begin our countdown. And again, we're not in the business here of making prophecies. Like, I'm not in the business of saying, on this date, this will happen.
I mean, we're all going to die someday.
Nor am I trying to dodge accountability. Like, if I was making prophecies, I would own it and explain, well, this is how I arrived at it. And I'm kind of explaining my reasoning in advance of many of the things that we observe. How I'm arriving at this. Why, after watching the madness, I expected this to go down with Musk, as it has. And I'm explaining it because many of the people who make predictions using their little gematria calculators and their anonymous accounts on Twitter and stuff, they don't explain their reasoning. Like, oh, I just typed in these numbers and the universe was revealed. It's like, no, that's the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. That's different than reading through a third of a book and guessing the ending. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're looking at history as it's being performed in front of us, and we're looking at it as though it were a work of literature, which it is. It's a work. It's a literary construct. This meta script exists. It is the story that is being enacted in front of us through fake news and becomes our history, which is our shared fake history. So I'm not making specific dates a priority here, but more like the trends, where it's going, reading it as it goes. But looking back, and just past precedent is a good indicator of what's to come. Looking back, it seems that all of the major events were preceded by an inundation of propaganda to prepare us for it. And this is a consistent pattern. So it just happens to be the case that it seems, just by looking at the media landscape, that we are being psychologically prepared for the next 9/11, the source of which will be some domestic violent extremist colluding with bad guys in Russia, possibly through the internet. But there is going to be some kind of Turner Diaries type of situation, likely targeting Seattle. And all signs point to the Space Needle as being the symbol of the West, the symbol that really has the resonance that attaches it to the entire event, like the Twin Towers, obviously 9/11. Very potent symbol, what these things mean, but the Space Needle seems like the icon. But beyond that, the date 6/11 corresponds for a lot of reasons, from Timothy McVeigh's death date, the numbers used in the Trump assassination attempt, its use throughout the right wing, but its meaning seems to suggest a combination of nukes, domestic violent extremists, and possibly the symbolic date of 6/11 chosen because of their McVeigh martyr character. So there's a lot there. And this is just my assessment. Jurassic Liars has been following this very closely and similarly has picked up on a lot of predictive concurrent programming alluding specifically to that date. And he's done deep dives into the relationships between that date, other days, and it gets to be overwhelming, but it's consistent throughout. It's actually, I would almost say, conclusive that date has very special significance to this. So am I saying that in 11 days Seattle's going to get it? Wouldn't shock me, to be honest. Would not surprise me one bit if they pull it off that date. If they don't, I would be a little, because I don't see this Final Destination movie coinciding with the real Space Needle opening Century Project stuff, aligning so perfectly otherwise. As, again, past precedent would suggest, this would indicate something. Same with 9/11. As often has been talked about, the lead up to 9/11 was a lot of terror attack-like stuff in the movies. So I won't say I'm putting money on it, but I have no reason to suggest that it wouldn't be a likely date. But I'm not resting our entire model on predictive dates. It wouldn't make sense. And it's not really a hit or miss shooting from the hip thing anyway. We have a methodology here, which is consistently vindicated, and I would say it's been demonstrated to be more accurate, a predictor of things, than the idea that this stuff's all just random. All right, this has been great. We'll continue this conversation a little bit later, and we'll figure out what's going on with Musk's black eye and other things. If you want to follow my notes, go to minds.com/Infinite Plane Society. I have receipts for everything we talk about, links, and also if you're a member of the website, you will be getting a link to the Discord server. And if you're on YouTube, just go to the list of posts and you'll see a link to the Discord server. We're going to be more active there we already started. So just say hi and I'll be handing out wrenches this evening. Estevan says, it never gets old being in these truth chats and listening to people talk about how history is scripted, yet go balls out of the Bible. The feet washing ritual has to do with the lower self, the subconscious. Yeah, I have my own issues with the Bible in the sense that when people say the Bible, I'm like, well, it doesn't really exist. You have a construct we call the Bible, but the Bible is a very subjective thing. Even if everybody has the exact same copy, they fight over it. It's not really a monolith. And Christianity is not monolith. Each church is different. Each person takes it differently. So I don't know who to trust, and I don't outsource spirituality to any institution. And at this point, I don't have enough answers to have a conclusive model. So I'm kind of agnostic. So I'm not an atheist. And at one point, I considered myself a deist. I thought it was a firm, something you could just rest on. But I can't even go there. I'm certainly not atheistic, but I am very agnostic about the various concepts of it we've been shown. Esteban says it's a stupid book that was given to us just like CNN. Yeah, oftentimes I refer to holy books as filters. Like, in other words, the mass media could be looked at as your reality filter. You're plugged into this. This is your worldview. And this is true. You're plugged into this particular filter. We'll just say mainstream media, left or right, doesn't matter. You now live in the same fictional universe as everybody else, and you believe these lies. And this is where, if you're a believer, you have absorbed a lot of lies. And I don't know if it hurts for me to say it, but it's true. Fake events presented as real, propaganda, atrocity propaganda, perception management, influence operations, PR stunts. Yeah, your worldview is chock full of lies. It's been distorted. And we have a consensus that we all share, which we can demonstrate to be flawed. So we live in a flawed model as it is. But the model we live in, this consensus, is tantamount to a religion. It gives us our worldview and our values. And we have our priesthood. We get our answers. And I think that holy books do the same thing. If you live your life through Dianetics, you have a specific worldview. If you live your life through the Quran, you have a different worldview. And so on with all the different holy books. So I kind of look at holy books as a myopic and selective worldview representing the power elite. That ultimately what media has accomplished, that all the other religions tried, is they succeeded with monotheism and universalizing it. So every religion claims, this one here is the one God, the one answer. We have all the answers here. Everybody else is wrong. And they all say this. But now the media has one-upped all the religions. Everybody agrees with this worldview, even as they fight over these various worldviews. And you have your heaven, they have their heaven. Well, guess what? Everybody believes in space. So I kind of think that mass media has not only supplanted religion, and it provides us with new myths, but it has also given us a new iteration of heaven. But as far as the question of spirituality, I would say that's separate from the question of God constructs. And one of my problems with religion in general is the obligatory externalization of one's loci of control. That now the supernatural must be attributed to a higher power, an external agency. And I'm kind of more in the camp of I'm more inclined to believe in magic than any of these gods that have been presented. And when I say magic, I'm just talking about the idea of the human will being a factor in events, in what we experience, that we are co-manifestors in some sense, but not in some kind of vague, feel-good, new agey way, but in a more disturbing way that maybe we're not supposed to know because it could be so disruptive. I mean, have you seen In the Mouth of Madness? In the Mouth of Madness is a John Carpenter film, so it's a must watch. They Live was a documentary, so is In the Mouth of Madness. But it presents the idea of if mankind is all attached to one set of beliefs about the world's going to live in some kind of a harmony because we all believe the same thing. But now this new factor is introduced, this new holy book. In this case, it was a fiction book, a horror book, not a religious book. But everybody essentially got so obsessed by this fictional worldview, written by Sutter Kane, which is the name of the author, that the world starts to reflect it. Like man collectively co-manifested this nightmare scenario. And it's just a metaphor for how things really work with religion. I mean, if you look at what religious people do to each other and to themselves, what they want to do, what they want to happen to you after you die, like religions they do, in fact, like a mind virus, take over and bring about madness. So In the Mouth of Madness could easily be about a religion taking over the world as about a science fiction book, or rather a horror book. Right now, it's science fiction. We live in a science fiction, not a horror, which is kind of cool. I'd rather live in a sci-fi than a horror, even though it leans towards dystopian. Math Powerline says, religion gives people a crutch to lean on. Hopegate. Yeah, in a way, it's kind of a... Yeah, that's true. But like my criticism of religion is limited because what the public experiences as religion is the exoteric cover for a more ancient tradition. And it's so deceptive on the face of it. If you think about the idea that they're given one set of explanations, and the people teaching them these explanations believe the complete opposite. And isn't this the same model as media? Where the people high up in media are telling you one thing, but they're behind the psyops. Like they know it's fake and that you're just sheep and they're manipulating you for your money and your loosh. Angst G says, great movie. Prince of Darkness was good too. It's the only one I haven't seen. I like John Carpenter's work. They Live. If you haven't seen They Live, pretty much a must watch. If it includes Mars and they teleport to Mars through a portal, no space travel. In the Mouth of Madness, again, about mass mind control, co-creation, definitely worth seeing. Because at the end, the character Sam Harris is the character. He is the only sane person in the world, and he takes refuge in a padded room. And that's us, if you think about it. If you're in the world stage, you're actually kind of insane. In other words, you've allowed the simulation, the myopic worldview, the internalized Truman Show, to be superimposed over the real thing. And the more immersed in media you are, the more divorced from reality you are. So the more you lean into the metaverse, the more you're technically crazy. So in the movie, he's the only one who hasn't gone crazy. He hadn't read all the books. And he didn't want to read the books. He didn't want the mind virus. So he didn't, Sam Neill. So he didn't go crazy with the rest of the masses. He didn't read the holy books. But then what happens? He leaves the asylum and he sees that, oh, it's a movie now. So he sits in the movie theater and he eats popcorn and he laughs himself into insanity as he watches his own life playing out on the screen. So the movie's kind of meta. But I think it's an apt description for the place where we live as far as the creative control over reality Sutter Kane had is analogous to the creative control that the mass media exerts. And if you don't believe me, just review 2020 and try to tell me that the mass media doesn't control the masses. All right, so we'll be back tomorrow, likely, hopefully earlier, but for Infinite Planes Saturn Day. I'm going to work on this whole system and try to speed things up so I can do audio and Discord, but it's very limited now. Maybe I can play the audio of Musk here since it's been loading. Yes, so here's Elon Musk describing how he got a black eye.
I wanted to ask quickly, Mr. Musk, is your eye okay? What happened to your eye? I noticed there's a bruise there.
Well, it wasn't. I wasn't anywhere near France, so.
What does that mean?
I didn't notice it.
First lady of France.
I didn't notice.
I was just walking around with little X, and I said, "Go ahead, punch me in the face," and he did. It turns out even a 5-year-old